Hi, friends. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach, author of the fabulous book, A Life to Die For, and also, one of the co-authors of the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. This is episode 184. And we're calling this one Release the Prisoner. Now, psychic shadow can be described as any aspect of yourself that you hide or repress because you believe it is inappropriate, unacceptable, bad, or wrong. Every individual instance of shadow can be traced back to some disempowering belief which arose out of psychological or spiritual wounding, most commonly in connection with unpleasant events that happened during childhood. Now, everyone is afflicted with shadow in one way or another, but because this phenomenon is largely unconscious, most people are not fully aware of it and don't know how to deal with it. Many who know something about shadow have the mistaken belief that it represents only the worst or most undesirable parts of ourselves. Well, as we're going to find out today, that's just not true. But this leads people to believe that they should leave well enough alone. Why dig into the past, they ask, or it'll just bring trouble and pain. That perspective is actually wrong. And as I said, we're going to be going through that today. It's more correct to think of shadow as any disowned or disavowed part of ourselves, which means that some really amazing and positive aspects may have been pushed into the background and forgotten about. For this reason, shadow is actually a treasure trove of untapped creativity, potential, and self-understanding. For this episode, I've invited back the master of voice, creator of vocal Reiki, founder and main host of Gift of Healing TV, and international speaker and author. She's a master teacher and practitioner of Reiki and vocal Reiki who draws on her own life experiences and healing journey to support others with understanding and empathy. So please welcome back my good friend and the always delightful and charming Sara Jane to our program. Welcome back, Sara. It's good to be with you again, and I'm looking forward to seeing your smiling face on the camera.
And it always takes so much longer than I expect for it to do it. Hello, David. Thank you.
Yeah. So you and I have been together on these kinds of presentations, I would say probably about 20 or 30 times by now. It just seems like, yeah, certainly quite a few times on Life Mastery TV, but also on your program and other programs that we've kind of come together on. So it's really awesome to be able to share space with you again, especially with a topic that is so dear to my heart. As you know, shadow is one of those things that I talk about a lot, and particularly as it relates to the ego mind and how the ego mind operates and stuff like that. So I'm curious, you proposed this topic to me, and what is it about shadow that has become more alive in you right now that you want to talk about this?
Well, literally, the day I got your email, I saw this particular post on social media, and it's a common misconception that the shadow is home to the worst parts of ourselves. But this is false. The shadow is actually home to the rejected parts of ourselves. And for this reason, the shadow is full of untapped potential and creativity. Well, bearing in mind my own story and the people pleasing and the totally understanding that if you are a people pleaser, the one thing you're going to do, if somebody turns around and says they don't like something that you do, it's going to be, okay, I've got to get rid of that bit of me because it's obviously not an acceptable bit.
Right.
And obviously the conversations we've had knowing your feelings about shadow. And I thought, do you know what? This is totally perfect. And so if you like, the universe gave the topic.
Well, you know, and the universe usually does provide gifts in all kinds of amazing ways. As you know, you and I, we've had many conversations. So, I agree with you 100%. But I think shadow is one of those areas that is really, really misunderstood in the world. I mean, shadow, people kind of have this notion of shadow for thousands of years, but it wasn't until Carl Jung came along in late 1800s or thereabouts that he formalized the concept of shadow into a working model that a lot of people now are starting to relate to. And I guess he basically said that everything in the unconscious is shadow. That was his basic statement. The entire unconscious is shadow. And I understood what he was saying, but I don't agree with his statement for the simple reason that most people think of shadow as bad stuff. And unconscious isn't all bad stuff. It isn't all dark. It's just kind of hidden. And so I think we need to, distinguish between those two ideas. The idea of being hidden because, we have some judgment about it or whatever, and being bad. Those are two different things.
And I think is shadow really the right word to use because of people's perception of the word shadow?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because when somebody says shadow, my immediate reaction is the sun shining and it's that dark patch that is that shadow of me.
Correct.
And so maybe it's the right word, maybe it's not the right word, but it's the words that is used. And yes, when I think about what I was saying before, which was about when I sort of thought, okay, people don't like that part of me, but it is about what is the potential and the creativity of that. What was I trying to convey at the time when somebody turned around and said, don't do that, don't like that, that's, whatever the terminology, whatever, a smacked hand for doing something, whatever. For all we know, what we were trying to do was have an aspect of creativity. It is just the way we were able to vocalize it or show it. How many children get in trouble for drawing or painting in inappropriate places? All they are trying to do is show their creativity,
right.
But boy, they choose the wrong place to do it.
That's true. And I've done it myself. I'm sure when I was a kid, I remember, I got to tell you a little story. My son, Kevin, I think he was probably only 2 or 3 at the time. We had just finished painting his bedroom. And I came in afterwards and there were big blue marks all over the wall that I had just painted. Of course, I reacted out of anger. If I could have held back and just looked at this from a grounded, here I'd done all this work and what the hell are you doing? This was my reaction. And, but when I thought about it afterwards, I thought he saw me painting the wall and he wanted to do what Daddy did. He wanted to express himself too. Perfectly normal. Now, of course, I went back to him afterwards and I said, look, man, I'm really sorry that I got angry. I understand that, what does a 3-year-old know when I say that? He just knows that I was sorry. That's all he knows. But I know how I felt. And it's interesting that you should bring up that particular topic because it touches a really tender part of me, I'm sure you've done the same sorts of things in your life where you reacted to something and then afterwards you looked and said, what the hell was that reaction about? Have you had that situation?
Oh, it still happens. As much as we like to think that we're more grounded, we're more balanced, we're more whatever words you want to use, things still trigger us. And we've had that conversation relatively recently on another series of your programs about triggers. But they are things that, sort of, and it's being able to, okay. But all he saw, other than the fact that he saw you doing the painting, was a lovely blank canvas for expressing himself.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I think nowadays parents are pretty clever at recognizing this in kids. And maybe I was kind of dumbed down or something when it was my turn to raise kids. But the interesting thing is nowadays parents will put up, some kind of special board or something on the wall, and they'll say, you can write whatever you want on here, and of course you still want your kids to start kind of stay within the boundaries and understand that just writing on a wall somewhere isn't really considered appropriate kind of behavior most of the time, so I get that. But here's what's interesting about this. If we as parents continue to put the brakes on the creativity of our children, then they themselves will start to shut themselves down. They will start to hide that really beautiful aspect of themselves because they want to make mommy and daddy happy. They want mommy and daddy to be smiling all the time. They don't like it when mommy and daddy are angry or afraid or whatever. It makes them uncomfortable. So they're trying, really, in a way, they're trying to protect themselves from mommy and daddy's reaction. And they know that one way of doing this is to not draw on the wall, but what that kid translates that to is, I won't draw at all. And that's kind of where shadow begins, because that aspect of the child, that impulsive, creative, spontaneous aspect is still there. It just has been he's been trying to push it back in the background, hide it, but it's still there. And it will sometimes find its way out in unconscious methods.
And another thing is sort of when a child sort of wishes to express something or pass a comment about something, and then they hear the words, "Don't speak to me like that." And it's just like, and especially in teenage years, oh boy, it's just like, hang on, I was passing a comment. And so that is when children start thinking, right, I've got to keep my thoughts to myself. You have that said to you too many times, and it's, will you start talking to me? When you're thinking to yourself, why am I going to speak to you? You obviously don't want to listen because you keep telling me off if I open my mouth.
That's right. You keep telling me to shut up.
And it creates so much insecurity.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have had that, I still get it from a friend, and it's just like, hang on a second. And I'm just thinking, do you know what? I've either got to say something, and sometimes I do say something, then my tone of voice does change.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what you heard, but that's not what I said.
Yeah. Maybe you should listen louder.
But I think it's also a matter of, obviously, as we get older, it's, okay, we're hearing something, and we know what we've been through. And it's, okay, can we stop and take a breath long enough to think, okay, I remember getting told off for my tone of voice.
Right.
Maybe I should ask a question. Would you like to rephrase that? Anything. But rather than going into that anger, actually, okay, I'm not 100% certain I like the tone of voice you were saying, but can we talk about what you've just said? Because people are listening more to the voice than to the words.
Right. That's right. Yeah, this is a real interesting perspective for sure. The idea that because mommy would say, "Don't you talk to me like that," when I hear that kind of vocal expression from somebody else, could be completely different words, but that same basic tone, the tonality, the energy behind the words, it resurfaces that old memory. I get a trigger reaction, and before you know it, we're in an argument that the other person never intended.
Neither did you.
Well, maybe I did, but from a shadow perspective, maybe I did. But that's what we're talking about, right? We have these shadows that exist inside of us, mostly because of the beliefs that we took on when we were young kids. They're unconscious now because we just put them in the background. We kind of forgot about them, but we still use them. We still have them as, I guess, coping strategies. Our little binkies that we can suck on, as ways of living our lives in order to get from one point to another. And yet other people watching us can say, why does that guy keep behaving like that? Does he even know he's doing it? By the way, I want to mention to the folks who are here live, thank you, first of all, for joining us. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. But if you have questions or comments that you want us to deal with, please put them into the chat and we will get to them as soon as we can. Anyway, I just want to say thank you for being here. So yeah, the idea that, I might react to something and it's a completely unconscious reaction. I don't even notice it until the reaction has already happened. Then I look and I say, what the hell? Where did that come from? And that's kind of how people suddenly become aware of their shadow. Where did that come from? That's not me. That was totally accidental. I have no idea what was going on. The devil made me do it. And that's kind of what happens. That's one of the ways that we become aware of our own shadow. When we react to something and then we allow the reaction to create some kind of behavior, and then we look at the behavior and say, wait a minute, that's not really what I wanted. What is going on? And that's where you have the opportunity now to start looking back at your own belief systems and start to understand where that might have come from.
Yeah, it's for me, I think about it as being a protection mechanism that has been inbuilt in us from our past experiences and things we have witnessed, not just things that have happened to us, but things we've watched around us. And then we go into that reaction that creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Of, you know what, let's get you out of this situation altogether. You're going to behave in this way. That means that will come to an end and we've got you away, we've got you safe. But hang on a second. There are times with our shadow that it is the only thing that is hurting us these days. It isn't allowing us to tap in to our true self. I like to sort of put it that our mind, our ego, its first role was as a protector. However, I'm an adult. I'm in my 60s. I am not a child anymore. Come on, mind, ego. It's time you started helping me to live my life. Yes, you can keep an element of protection, making sure I don't do stupid things, but actually you should be protecting me from those automatic reactions, not making me do them.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's really good. And in fact, you hit on something that I think is very important. If we can find a way to quiet our ego mind, then we can learn to harness the power of the ego mind so that it supports us rather than sabotages us. And that's really a very, very important awareness. If you're just operating from the place of ego, then you're just going to go through life from a very, very low level of consciousness. If you can operate from the place of soul and spirit, then you can begin to, I guess, tame the ego is probably the word that I would like, and have it become like a co-pilot in your life or a navigator or something, rather than the captain of the ship who kind of steers things into. It's more like the bull in the china shop kind of thing.
The mind ego can lead you into so much more hurt and pain But and it is that self-fulfilling prophecy. You are creating what it's supposed to be there to prevent.
Right. Yeah.
And stopping us from just becoming aware of those aspects that we quashed, or tried to detach ourselves from, that is buried in that safe somewhere or in that dungeon or whatever, however you want to term it, that aspect of those, not that aspect, those aspects, because there are going to be many aspects. And for me, that's where the healing of the inner child comes in, of healing those aspects that felt, and that all that did was compound in me, feeling unwanted, unloved, not good enough, etc., 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 because all I kept doing was taking parts of me and getting rid of them.
Yeah, so, and then think about what's left afterwards.
Well, what was left afterwards was the people pleaser who had no idea that it was okay to think about herself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And was scared to do anything out of the ordinary,
right,
for fear of what other people thought. So that blocked creativity, that blocked potential, because of the fear of other people.
Right. Well, that people pleaser aspect that you describe, that is a specific example of what I call compensatory protective identity. And we all have them. We all have different ways of showing up that we have learned as a result of our journey that help us to feel approved, feel accepted, to believe that we are fitting in, that we are, meeting the expectations of society. So people pleaser is one example of that. Another example is the class clown. Someone who is constantly making jokes to try and get people laughing, because people who laugh tend to be happy, and if they're happy, they can't be angry at me, right? And it's also a way of gaining a certain level of approval if you're really good at making jokes and getting people to laugh and stuff. But all of us, I'm sure, have met people who take it like 25,000 steps too far. And they're joking about everything. They don't ever have a serious thought. And so it's impossible to know really what that person is actually like. What you hear are all the jokes and these deflections. And then you have the same sort of thing. You have somebody who simply cannot accept a compliment. You try to offer a compliment or say thank you for something. Oh, never mind, don't worry about it. It's not such a big deal. Thank you for being the person you are. That made it possible for me to give this to you. They always try to deflect it away from themselves. And so they create this sense of false humility. That's what they're trying to do, because they do not ever want to be seen as someone who has pride in their skills and abilities, or might be seen as a braggart. You see? So that's kind of what happens. We have all these different ways of compensating. And so we create these protective auras around ourselves, thinking that they represent who we are, or at least how we want to be seen in the world. And they believe that no one can see through it. And of course, the sad truth is, think about your own friends who do that to you. You can always tell when they're putting on airs. You can always tell. And it's not until they become authentic and real that you actually feel a desire to connect with them.
It's also, going back to your comment about the accepting a compliment. Oh, I was one of those. I could. It was just like, do you realize who you're complimenting? It's somebody who's unworthy, unlovable, because of the insecurities.
Right.
But it's also then, because you're always doing for others. But then occasionally you really could do with a little bit of help for yourself. And this friend of mine, and I sort of said to him sort of one day, is there any chance, I'd like to ask your help, but if you can't do it, it doesn't matter. And I got into so much trouble for saying that. It was just like, Sarah, don't do that.
Right.
If I can help you, I will. If I can't, I won't. It is that simple. But let people see if they can help you.
Right.
Because I never expected people to do stuff for me. And literally within either just before that or just after that, I received an angel card that was let yourself receive. Those of us that are givers struggle to receive. But the card put it very beautifully to me. And that was, you get so much pleasure from giving to others. Allow others the pleasure of giving to you.
Yeah, that's a really powerful statement. It's like, I mean, one of the favorite sayings in the world is it's better to give than receive. And I don't know, some people may even claim that that's in the Bible somewhere. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but it's better to give than to receive. And how disempowering that really is when you think about it. Because if everybody is giving because of that statement, then that means nobody is receiving. Although if I'm giving, somebody has to be getting what I'm giving. I mean, think about it for a minute. Now, I like to reverse it. It is better to receive than to give, because you get to experience the other person's generosity. And at the same time, you give them the experience of giving. So receiving is a two-pronged sword, whereas giving, who knows why a person gives something, you know? Sometimes they do it because it might be one of those compensatory protective identities that is designed to say, look how wonderful I am. Don't you love me because I give you all this stuff? Well, if it's coming from that place, then it's coming from shadow. And it's coming from that place of insecurity. You see what I'm saying? So if I just give something with no attachment whatsoever, I'm giving it out of my heart and my desire to recognize you as a being, an important being in my life. That is the true form of giving in my mind. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a rant off subject.
No, but I think it's also thinking about when you are constantly giving and doing for others, you're not allowing yourself the freedom and the time for you. And maybe that within a lot of people, and which I suppose was me, the people pleaser, was just hoping that people would accept me for a short while. And then they'd wake up to the fact, actually, she's unworthy, she's not good enough, all the rest of it. But when you are coming from such, I know this is very difficult for you to accept, maybe about me, that I was really that insecure, because
no, it's not. I'm not judging in any
no.
way,
I know.
I am laughing because I have had similar experiences in my life, and I'm sure the people watching this have had experiences like that in their lives too.
Yeah, and I think it's so there are many different ways that people react to. You touched on a couple of them, but some people will go into anger. The things that happen to me, the things that happen to you, the things that happen to our listeners and millions and millions of other people, our story, how we react to our story. And there are those that become the people pleaser. There are those that go into absolute anger. You talked about the person who goes into being the clown. But there are those people that, do you know what, if you're going to push me away, I'm going to push you away even further.
I'll push you away first.
Yeah, absolutely. But then,
That's
okay, right. I think the trigger in me was relationships finish. And if somebody did something that I felt was that first sense of, okay, they've sussed me, then that would trigger me. that would trigger me into this creating the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do remember my mother-in-law turning around and saying she treats the cats better than she treats you.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. This whole idea of all of these compensatory identities that we can create. I think every single one of them is an indicator of some kind of shadow. And so and the reason we're bringing this up and talking about all kinds of different ones is so that you know, because I believe all of us have compensatory protective identities, one way or another. All you need to do is start looking in your life, maybe do a little journaling or something and write down how are the ways in which I show up to protect myself, to keep myself safe. Do I show up as a people pleaser? Do I show up as a class clown? Do I show up as somebody who cannot take compliments? Do I show up, as a deflector? How do I compensate for the possibility that someone might inadvertently hurt me? I have learned in my life that certain behaviors cause the adults and the authority figures in my life to react in a way that makes me feel pain. And so I've created this compensation in order to protect myself against that. Now, if you can find those compensatory identities within yourself and you can write down some details about them, like where did this come from? When did it first show up? What's the earliest time in my life that I can remember using this strategy? When did I discover that this actually works and gets people to smile at me or to appear to like me? Write it down. And then kind of dig a little deeper and say, okay, now what was the thing that happened before that required me or that led me to create this compensation? And once you get down to that, now you understand the source of your shadow. Oh, I see. It was because mommy kept telling me to shut my mouth. It was because I believed that every idea I had was a bad idea. It was because it may be deeper than that. It may be darker. It may be more traumatic. Like maybe somebody actually sexually assaulted you or did something really outrageous. But whatever it was, you created the compensation in order to protect yourself from the pain of that circumstance. And that became your kind of default way of showing up in the world. And you're probably still doing it today unless you've done some work on it.
It's feeling that people aren't listening to you and you're not heard.
Yep.
And that is a huge one. It really is, because if you feel that people aren't listening and that you aren't heard, that hurts. That really hurts. And so I didn't write it down, but I go for walks in the local woods and I sort of then let myself go off thinking, okay, sort of about things and understanding what's happened and being able to think, okay, actually that is now registered. It may have been for some years ago, but where did the initial come from that caused that trigger that put me into doing that again? What made me feel that I wasn't being listened to, that I wasn't being heard? And I was able to go right back to that incident, that accident as a child. Because, of course, there I was in hospital crying for my parents, and it didn't come. Not their fault. Rules of the hospital and circumstances that meant I saw them once a week for an hour.
I know. Yeah.
For 3 months. That little girl was crying. She wanted her mummy, and she wasn't there. She wasn't being listened to. She certainly wasn't heard. And she was not in a place to vocalize other than by tears that there was something wrong and she needed comfort and support.
Yeah.
So, yes, if we can find something in adulthood that is was a situation that obviously triggered something, but then can be open to, okay, what was this? What was it that it caused? What feelings did it cause in me? Now, can I take that back? How far back? I'm not telling people to go back into their past and live there. I'm really not. But our past can open so many doors of understanding for us. And so for me, we should never say, just forget the past, live in today. There's far too much past within majority of us that is still hurting, that people would call the shadow, that it's time that we reconnected with and helped to heal and helped to feel heard.
Right. Yeah, it's well, the process really it has to do with, as you say, raising awareness. And I like to use the phrase, uncover, illuminate, heal, and integrate the shadows. I like those four terms. However, you're not really healing the shadow. What you're doing is you're healing the wound that happened probably when you were a child, the wound that created the belief system that allows the shadow to exist. That's what you're really doing. And it sounds complicated, but it really isn't. It's just that the shadow is something that we can all kind of just point our finger at and say, that's the thing I want to look at. Because it's kind of like, if you think about quantum physics. In quantum physics, we want to track these subatomic particles. Well, unfortunately, subatomic particles are called that for a reason. They're impossible to see. You cannot see a subatomic particle. Even with the most high-powered electron microscope, you can't see it. So we don't even know for sure if the subatomic particle actually really exists. However, we do know that certain things happen in the context of a particular subatomic particle. And so scientists now have devised experiments that can tell that a subatomic particle was here, and there's the track to prove that it was here. Of course, we don't know where the subatomic particle is, but at least we know it was here, and we know it does these things. That's effectively what shadow spotting is all about. I can't necessarily see the shadow directly, but I can see where it's been, and I can see the things that it's done. And then I can hopefully coax it out of the darkness into the light so that I can look at it and bring some love and tenderness to it. Sarah Jane, you talked about inner child work, and virtually every shadow emanates out of the pain of a little child. So that's why it's really, really important. I'm glad you brought that up, to start thinking about coming back to your little child, your little boy or your little girl, just bringing a whole bunch of love, because you as the adult are the only one who knows exactly what that child went through.
Because they keep telling us.
Well, they keep telling us internally, but they don't necessarily keep telling the rest of the world. So even if they tried to tell mommy and daddy might not have heard it.
Yeah.
I mean, think of how many kids have tried to say, Grandpa molested me, and mommy and daddy say, oh no, don't be ridiculous. Grandpa would never do that. You know, how many times have kids been dismissed because they've said something that was absolutely truthful? And so we make them crazy. And it's no wonder we have so many people with shadow in their life.
Oh yeah, and those children are actually accused of being liars.
Exactly.
And then it's just like, well, hang on. And if you're that young that you may not understand the difference between truth and lie, and you know you're telling the truth, and an adult is referred to it as a lie, you are very confused.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you talked about, it's about healing the hurt. It is about healing the hurt, because once the hurt of that aspect is healed, it feels loved, it feels heard, it's not hurting anymore. That is when that shadow aspect can feel that it can come forward and slowly, hopefully, reintegrate. For me, when I work with people, it is very much about the adult has to be the one that revisits the child, their own child. I can't do the work. I can guide, and that's all I can do. And the child has got a lack of trust because they have felt so rejected. That aspect of you feels so rejected. And so it is about building that trust. Once the trust can be built between your younger self and you as the adult, then hopefully they will come to you. And they don't necessarily want words from you. All they really want, because the majority of that hurt, all they required at that point in time was somebody to hold them, to cuddle them, and to help them feel loved.
Exactly.
That's all I required. That little girl in hospital, she just wished to feel that comfort, that cuddle, that feeling loved. And what is the greatest healer? The greatest healer is love. And the most important person to love you is you. And we're not taught to love ourselves. And when we can actually, the majority of people aren't taught. There may be some that have been taught, but the majority of us are not taught to love ourselves.
Right.
It's considered selfish. Only I think people have, again, it's, as I said, using that word shadow, there can be a misconception about the word itself. The word selfish, I think, has been so misconstrued over the years as to what is truly a selfish act. And some people are called selfish when, do you know what, the last thing they're being is selfish. They're just protecting themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, I think we've been talking about a lot of different things here, and we've been talking about compensatory protective identities. We've been talking about behaviors. We've been talking about tracking shadows and stuff like that. And the thing that I want people to understand, and I think this is probably the most important part, if you don't, sooner or later, if you don't do the work to heal those old wounds, then you sort of become a prisoner of your own thinking, of your own behaviors. And that's really what we're talking about today. That's why we called this thing Release the Prisoner. So you create your own prison around yourself. Something that started out as maybe some protective imaginary armor has now turned into something that you can no longer easily remove. And so it feels like you're constrained, you're held back, you're being restricted from just fully expressing yourself. In a sense, you've created your own prison. And so what we're trying to bring awareness to is this idea that while there may be physical restraints that you have to deal with in real life, the ultimate restraint that keeps you from fully expressing is the one that you create up here. Okay? So what I'm hoping for is that you will become, I guess, inspired to start looking inward, to bring some love and attention to your inner child and heal those old wounds so that you can start to throw off the shackles that you built up over time. Man, I'm full of all kinds of metaphors today. I don't know what's going on, but they're just pouring out of me. So anyway.
But then it's true, isn't it? You know, the greatest prison is in our own mind. Yeah. You know, and I really do. That there was something that sort of came. Thoughts. Are they a friend or are they a foe? And there are times when our thoughts are absolutely our friend. that there are times when our thoughts can outrun absolute riot, and all they're doing is really holding us back. They are the biggest wall we have to climb. You know, mountain, rock face, whatever you want to use, that is the biggest block in our lives. Mm-hmm. Our own thoughts, our own mind, our own ego is the biggest block, is the biggest prisoner to us moving forward creatively. And we do open up to the potential you have. It doesn't matter what other people say and think. What speaks to you, whether it's a job, whether it's a hobby, whatever it is, what would you like to do? As I was coming out of this people-pleasing thing and being worried about what other people thought, I heard about the UK Wolf Conservation Trust. And as a member, you could go for a walk with the wolves. And it was just glorious. I would never, ever have done it in people-pleasing mode. But I was coming out of that. I not only became a member of the trust and went for a walk with the wolves, I became a trainee handler with the wolves. And I went to Romania for 2 weeks to track wolves in the Carpathian Mountains with the Carpathian Large Carnivore Project. And no, it was not to kill them. I would never get involved in that. I decided that this is my life. This is for me to live in my own way. When I did the abseil of the water tower, fairly locally, my mother's reaction was, "You can't do that."
I'm sorry, yes, what was that one? I don't remember hearing that.
I abseiled off a water tower locally, which is about 150 foot high or something.
Oh, so an abseil, that's like going down a rope or something?
Yeah.
Or are you in a kite or something like that? Or
No. The abseil is would be down the side of a building.
I see.
Except the fact the water tower is mushroom shaped, so you went down the mushroom and then you were in thin air, sort of. And
got it.
Yeah, but it was great. So much so that the friend and I that were doing it, we were doing it as a sponsorship. We went up and we were allowed to do it a second time. It started to rain. The rope got wet and we came down slower the second time than the first. but it was. Do you know what? This is my life. I am going to start having experiences. And I was in my 40s before I started having real experiences.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, when we're kids, we love doing stuff like that. We're totally free. We're open. We like to sing, dance, express ourselves in all kinds of different ways. But slowly that disappears. Now, I don't think it just disappears. I think in many ways it's kind of conditioned out of us. We are told, all right, that's fine. That was great when you were 5 years old. Now you're 6. It's time to grow out of it. That's kind of the way life goes. So our creativity got squashed. It got compressed. It got locked in away with all those other beautiful things that we put aside. So our creativity is caught in that prison too. And so just imagine if you can find a way to heal those old wounds, if you can bring the love and the forgiveness and the compassion and the healing to your inner child, then what happens is you give that child permission to give back all the creativity that was hidden away back then. And so that's when you start having these ideas about things that you'd like to do, and you start to feel like a kid again. It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. And one of the things when clients come to me, which is obviously happening right at the moment because we've still got so many restrictions, but even if working with people via the internet, my reaction is, right, end of the session. Now, my suggestion is Go off and do something that your child would love to do. Locally, go and paddle in the sea. We're autumn. There are so many leaves on the ground. Go out there and kick those leaves. Go and do what a child would do. Let your inner child out to play. Invite them in and you do it and have them right there with you, participating in it with you. And if you want to go and jump in a muddy puddle, go and do it. We have washing machines these days. We didn't when I was a kid, and we still did it. And as my mother refers to them as muddles, muddy puddles, muddles. and her grandchildren, and I don't have kids, but my sisters obviously did. And she always encouraged them because, right, I can stick all the stuff in the washing machine when we get home. It's right. And it's just encouraging the children to laugh and have fun. When was the last time you had a good laugh? And let that laughter be from your child. It isn't about being the clown. Yeah, when you were talking about that, and I was thinking, yes, there's a couple of people in the family I can think about who, once they grab hold of something and somebody's laughed about it, they don't let it go. And it gets to the stage where this isn't funny anymore. Actually, this is very annoying.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We are strange creatures, we humans. That's for sure.
Oh yes. Now as queer as folk.
There's certainly no lack of variety in our behaviors, and it's kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah. No. That we have a saying. I'm not sure what part of the country it comes from. Nout as queer as folk.
Nout as queer as folk. I love the English sayings. I have no idea what they mean, but
nothing. Basically, nout is nothing. Nothing as queer as folk.
Right. Well, I think ultimately what we're trying to do by waking people up to their shadow is to help them understand that shadow is not something to be feared and avoided. It's a great place. If you think it's like, for example, another little metaphor that popped into my head here, cave spelunking. That's a great word, isn't it? It's where you kind of shimmy down a rope into a deep, dark cave, and it's like pitch dark down there. And all you got is a flashlight or something to find your way around. But you never know what beautiful things you're going to find in a cave when you go exploring. Well, the same is true with the shadow. You know, if you think about it as an adventure in searching for treasure in the darkness, you can probably change your whole approach and say, wow, yeah, what are the parts of myself that I've hidden away for so long that I've forgotten about, that I would like to, maybe illuminate, and that's one of the reasons I use that word, illuminate, find out more about it, and then maybe find a way to bring it back into my life and use its energy in a positive way rather than letting it come out sideways and do all kinds of destructive things. That's really what we're ultimately trying to get to. And here's another thing. The more we integrate those parts of ourselves together and return them to our holistic whole selves, the more we reconnect to the true spiritual nature of who we really are. When we are kind of broken apart in all these pieces, we got all that stuff hidden away, it's hard for us to stay connected to our spiritual nature. But when you start integrating, then the spiritual nature just kind of comes alive and it just starts flowing, and all kinds of amazing, beautiful things happen when you allow yourself to reconnect to your natural divinity.
And I think that's what's so beautiful with some of what I do, because the use of the toning, the use of the voice, and especially working with somebody's name. Because what I've always found is that when people hear, but it's not about hearing, it's about feel their name worked with that energy. It's the energy of love, an acknowledgement of the whole of who you are. It's not about, oh, it's just that little bit we're seeing right now. It's about the whole, everything, every little bit you've detached. It's the honoring of all of who you are. And I really do feel when I work with that, that is the energy I'm working with. And it's love for the whole of who you are. And so if anybody's thinking, what is she talking about? Well, a lot of people will call it singing. It's not singing. For me, it is always toning. But
okay, so why don't you, we've got a few people on the panel here today. Why don't you choose one of the names and actually give us an example of what this might feel like? And whoever you choose, I'll just leave it to you to do that.
Is linchpin actually the individual's name? Whereas Heike might be, because it is really important that I work with the name that hopefully the mother called the child. So, and I know I know we've done this, and it was quite a few years ago with you. So,
all right. Well, just if you're then just choose a name of somebody that you don't have to know who they are. Let's just assume that it's a real name, and show us exactly what this toning looks like, so we can all get a sense of how it feels.
All right. Well, shall we do David?
Okay. All right. Oh boy, you want me to be the one to react?
Well, yes and no, because I know I said we've done this in the past, and I know what the name we used then. We didn't use David.
You can use my kid name if you want.
So let's just do David, and let's just see what happens. David, David,
It's amazing to me that even with just like 15 or 20 seconds of doing that, the power of the vibration transmitted across how many thousands of miles, and it still gets to me, and I can feel it in my chest. Now, I know that normally you would do this for a longer period of time with somebody, and I don't know, how long does a session normally last?
Oh, a session is about an hour. But having said that, it's not just me constantly doing that for an hour. There's way more to it than that, because there's an element of guidance and everything else. But I think we've got to realize that is where, for the majority of people, I can start with that connection and support them to connect with the inner child. But there are so many people today. When I started working with sound, there weren't too many people doing it. When I started talking about inner child, there weren't too many people doing it. And now there are so many. I would say to everybody, find the individual and the process that feels right for you. But what I was going to say was, even if you don't want to tone your name, and I only tend to do it when the house is empty, for me, because you can do it for yourself. Just start by speaking your name. Because the joy when you are doing this is that nobody is asking you for anything. Nobody's telling you to do anything. Nobody is telling you off. The energy is just about love and acknowledgement, of hopefully helping you to feel heard and listened to and loved.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. So I would invite anybody who's interested in learning more about this, contact Sara directly. You can find her contact information on my website. But one thing I want to say is there's this question, what's in a name? Well, let me tell you something. When somebody tones your name like that, I can tell you, I feel it. There's something in the name that I can't describe necessarily in words. There's certainly a feeling there, vibration. And I feel a higher level of vibration as a result just of that short session. So I want to thank you for doing that. And I want to just, I want to say thank you to all of you for showing up and watching this, because this is an important topic, and I hope that you got something valuable out of it. Sarah, we're just about at the end here. Is there something you'd like to say to finish up before I close out?
I think it's just really become aware of yourself and be open to all those bits of you. I really would, because I have, and I have the feeling, you have, David, it's why we do what we do. The experience, I do what I do because of what I've done for me and the work that has made so much difference to me in my life. I have gone from being a people pleaser to being very honest. I'm not saying I wasn't honest before, but I can almost get myself in trouble for being so blunt at times. Mm-hmm. But you have to be ready. You have to be ready. But I'm not going to ask you to revisit the pain and what happened. But there are going to be those people, you need that. You need to go right back into it. Other people don't. David works with people. I work with people. There are many people that work with people. Find what works for you and just go for it. Because you do deserve it. And the truth is, you will get to the stage where, having gone for it, you think, why didn't I do this before?
Absolutely. I sure thought that for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Why didn't I know about this before? I could have saved all of this. But yeah, so go into yourself. Love yourself enough to help heal yourself.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for being with me again. It's awesome. Again, as always, just spending time with you. We cover a lot of ground, as always, and that's fabulous. And thanks to all who came to watch today's show in the live presentation, and even those who may be watching the recording. I just want to remind everybody that you can catch my recordings of this and all my other shows on lifemasterytv.com, life-mastery-tv.com. And I truly hope you enjoyed this presentation. So please be on the lookout for an email from Learn It Live asking you to fill out a review. All these reviews really help us to spread the word. So I hope that you can take the time to do that. And finally, I'd like to remind everybody about my life mastery mantra, something that I really like for people to learn and practice on their own. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Well, thank you again, everybody. Until we meet again, I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. We'll see you next time right here on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.